So without much ado, let me take you to the presenter, the eminent personality of the day. Do we have Mr. Swarup there, please? Yes. Let me just give you a small brief about Mr. Swarup. I should be speaking about Mr. Swarup, without which, it is not right. Mr. Swarup was the former secretary of the Department of School Education and Literacy for the Government of India. Sir has actually fostered public-private partnership models with the aim of improving the quality of school education. A strategic thinker and visionary, he has won several accolades for his work, including being nominated as policy change agent by the Economic Times, as well as being recognized as one of the 35 action heroes by India Today in its 35th annual edition. With a career spanning 38 years in public governance, we have Mr. Swarup taking the session forward for us. So the stage is all yours, please.
Thank you very much. What a pleasure it is to be amidst you all. I'm so glad that you've launched this something which will be very useful. Collins Evaluate, which will be very useful to the teachers as well as to the students. And what I'll try and do today is to tell you how this launch actually fulfills some of the aspirations of the national education policy that was announced a few days ago. But before I come to the national education policy that was announced, let me give a bit of a background how I got associated with the policy formulation. Frankly speaking, I didn't have much to do about the policy. In fact, when the chairman of the committee that was tasked with this policy, when he came to meet me, I was then a school education secretary. I told him, you are wasting your time. He was a bit surprised because he thought that the government had constituted this committee to formulate a policy, and here was secretary telling him that he was wasting his time. I told him that the country probably does not require a policy as much as it requires an action plan. Meaning thereby, though you may have a policy, but until there is an action plan clearly outlining what needs to be done, how it will be done, who will do it, by when it will be done, the policy will remain a policy. And we have so many policies in the country. The common man, or the common student in this case, is more concerned about what happens on the ground rather than what is stated as a policy. And that is why when I was asked to come here to be a part of this program today, I was happy because it is fulfilling an action coming out of the policy. And that's why I'm here. Now, I became school education secretary out of the blue. I was arguably the most uneducated, illiterate civil servant to have donned this seat. I wouldn't have been there. My stint before that was in the coal ministry. And I remember when I was posted as coal secretary, I didn't know much about the coal sector either. So I asked a friend of mine, how is this coal sector? Instead of answering my question, he asked me a question. Have you seen gangs of Wasipur? No, all of you are from the southern part of the country. You won't know what Wasipur is all about. Wasipur is all about mafia and the coal sector. But by God's grace and on account of an absolutely amazing team that I had, we managed to overcome the problems of the coal sector. And I had recommended to the government to wind up the coal ministry. Instead of winding up the coal ministry, they wound me up. They sent me to school education secretary. I was a bit relieved in the sense that I thought I am traveling from dark dungeons of coal mines to the bright lights of school education. And to my utmost horror, I found that the mafias of the school education were worse than those of coal. And someone asked me, I told him, whereas mafias in the coal sector were overground and the mining was underground, in school education, most of the mafias were underground, eating into the essentials of Indian society. That's how bad the education system was, is, and probably will improve now with this education policy. And education policy that way shows the roadmap on how to get out of this mess. And I'll touch upon some of the aspects of these policies which are absolutely brilliant. And if implemented appropriately, will actually transform school education, which is required for a country like ours. When I took over as school education secretary, I had all these advisors coming from all over the world and within the country to advise me on what needs to be done. In fact, some of these events and my experiences in the school sector are outlined in my recently released book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, where I talk about the mafias of the school education, how I attempted to grapple with some of the mafias. And the good news is that the education policy also attempts to address some of the issues relating to mafias. And I will touch upon as I go along. But let me come to some of these salient, important aspects of the policy that actually can transform school education, as I said. The first and the foremost, and probably the most important aspect that will influence school education is the focus on the preschool education. All researchers have clearly established that the brain of a child gets formulated in the first few years, of 6, 7 years, 8 years. And so far, our focus was from class 1 to class 12, nothing before class 1. In some of the private sector, you had these preschool and nursery and pre-nursery education, but the government was not recognizing it, so to say. It was primarily in the private domain, most of it, but that also not very structured. And there again, when I was told about the launch of the product that you have today, you are not merely addressing assessment of children class 1 above, but before that also. That's a very remarkable feature, but that's very important. So this is a very, very important aspect of the policy. There are bound to be some operational problems, but I'm sure that with this focus, the primary requirements of the development of a child will get taken care of. The second important feature of the policy relates to teaching children in the mother tongue. Now, there has been some reaction on this part because of our obsession with English, and that is as a consequence of the colonial hangover that we have. We have believed erroneously that it is only in English that you can move ahead in life. It is not so. Again, researchers have clearly established that the complex concepts can be understood better in mother tongue than in an alien language. And I call English still an alien language. I may be speaking that language, but spontaneity at that age, the tongue that you speak at home is the tongue that a child needs to be educated in. Now, this does not mean that the child doesn't learn English or any other language. He can, but the medium of instruction, the policy field should be the mother tongue. Again, there would be operational problems in doing that, but I think theoretically speaking, that's a very good way forward. And those of you who have apprehensions about not being taught in English medium, let me tell you, the best school in Delhi, which throws up, I mean, many of my colleagues are from there, is a school, Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, which teaches in mother tongue from class 1 to 5. Most of the Jawaharlal Nehru Vidyalayas, which also throw up outstanding individuals, also teach in mother tongue from class 1 to 8. So all this thought about convent education, and most of these so-called convent schools don't teach in English actually. There are very limited number of convent schools. So I think that's a very good step. The next, I think, again, a very, very important aspect is the focus that the policy has on teachers. And there again, I think the product that you've launched today is not merely focused on children. It is also enabling teachers. To that extent, I think compliments to you for keeping the teacher in mind. Teacher is the pivot around whom the school education revolves. And to my mind, when I was education secretary, I was convinced that if the problems or issues relating to teachers are sorted out, most of our problems will get sorted out. And there are multiple problems. To my mind, the biggest mafia, which I call in my book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, is the mafia of the B.Ed and D.Ed colleges. You know, out of the 16,000 colleges, I discovered that 4,000 of them do not exist actually. They're just on paper, then give you a degree. It's a racket going on there. And the policy addresses that issue by coming up with a proposal of 4-year integrated B.Ed colleges. Now, this will help in 2-3 ways. One, of course, it will eliminate all the fraudulent or non-existent B.Ed colleges because they are not 4-year and they'll have to convert into 4-year colleges, go through a fresh process of certification, and hence they can be sifted out, those that don't exist. The other important aspect, and very important, is right now teachers become teachers, or students become teachers as the last resort. They try and get occupation or employment somewhere else. If they don't get it, then they do B.Ed and do it. Now, under the new education policy, they'll have to decide after class 12 whether they want to become teachers, because they'll have to pursue that 4-year course. So in that sense, this provision of the policy will do a lot of good to teachers. The third important aspect relating to teachers is the in-service training. There again, I think what you've launched today, so to say, it will, apart from evaluating the child, it will also help the teacher to train itself in terms of use of technology, in terms of use of those questions through which they will be able to evaluate the children. So as I keep saying, I am happy to be here because you are looking at the operational part of what the policy desires. So in that sense, I think this product should be and would be very useful to the schools. The other important aspect, which is directly related to what you've done today, is the focus on assessment. Now, there is a difference between examination and assessment. In the examination, the child through rote learning, gets something inside him and uses those 3 hours to, I use this word, unfortunately, to vomit it out and get the best of marks that you can have. That is not learning. For me, learning is the assessment or evaluation which you propose to do in your product. It's a continuous assessment of a child, thereby assessing what is going wrong where and taking those corrective steps. I don't think examination can do that. An assessment does that. Assessment looks into various aspects and sees which are the aspects in which the child is not picking up. And then the teacher guides the teacher, enables the teacher then to take up those aspects, to strengthen those aspects in the child. And that's where the assessment is much more important than the examination. In fact, one of the surprising features of the policies, which I don't agree with, is the board examination in class 3, 5, 8, and 10 and 12. I think board examination during my time also used to be a nightmare, the thought of board examination. And if you're going to have board examination every alternative year, I think the child will be under enormous pressure. As against that, I would suggest to the government, in fact, after seeing what you've done here, to have these continuous evaluation, periodic evaluation. Now we have the technology to do that. So in that sense, I think policy shows that roadmap, but very surprisingly talks about examination. But in any case, if such assessment tools become available on a larger scale, I think government can also think in terms of not having examination, but assessment to see what is the objective of all these exercises, to find out where the child is unable to pick up. And that's where assessment is a much profounder tool as compared to an examination. And again, that's why I compliment you all for coming up with this assessment tool, which obviously over a period of time can improve, because 30,000 questions is a good pool. But when you divide it into all the classes and subjects, the per subject and per topic, the number may not be huge. The number will have to be much larger than what you have. But to begin with, it's fine. You can increase the number subsequently. The other very interesting aspect of the policy relates to another chapter of my book, where I call this farcical delusion. Now, what is this farcical delusion? When I took over as Secretary of School Education, I was shocked to learn that children can get 100 out of 100 in English literature. Shakespeare must be turning in his grave. How in the hell can a child get 100% in literature, Hindi or English? So what we did was, I tried to find out how can a child get it. So I made a very interesting discovery. And that discovery was that every board, ICSE, CBSE, and all the state boards, they spike the marks. So all those young people sitting here who would have got, say, 95, 98% marks, actually you didn't get as many. Another 10% were added by your boards. Now, I tried to find out why did this happen. It happened because everyone was happy. The child was happy with this spiking. The teacher was happy. School was happy. States were happy. Politicians were happy. Everyone was happy with this farcical delusion. And it continued. The child later on discovered that he was not worth 100 out of 100 in English literature. But when I found that out, I called all the boards to Delhi and discussed with them and convinced them that this farcical delusion should stop. It didn't, because a High Court gave a stay order, by which time I was transferred out or I retired, and thereafter no one pursued it. But the policy does it. Policy says that all this spiking happened because it enabled children to get admission in good universities, because this was the benchmark on the basis of which admissions were given. But what policy does is, it talks about an entrance test in the universities. Once that happens, this maramari, as we call here, for spiking of marks will have to stop, because then these marks will not be valid, so to say, for admission to universities. So in a way, it will do that. There are many other aspects of the policy, but I'm touching upon only a few of them. I think the focus on vocational education is phenomenal, because many children go on to do BA and MA and becomes totally unemployable. Now the child will take a call whether he wants to go out into a vocation and then get into that training from class 6 itself. The foundation can be laid at that point in time. So to that extent, it's very good. And finally, the policy talks about the holistic development of the child. It's not rote learning or examination. It talks about his personality development, hence the focus on extracurricular activities, which will now become curricular activities, sports activities. So all in all, it's a very well-rounded policy. And I will conclude by saying, I think the focus on assessment is very, very critical in the policy. And I think what you've done today is in fulfillment of a very important object of the policy. So compliments to you and all the best to you, and make best of this tool that is available. I am available for questions for for a few minutes. Whoever has a question, I'll answer anything under the sun, even not limited to education policy. You can ask me any question. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Swarup. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. And sir, like you rightly mentioned, 30,000 questions is, yes, of course, like you mentioned, it might sound a little small, but right now for a start, I think 30,000 seems to be a justifiable number to start with. And we will be surely adding on to our question bank. And we will be adding questions and making sure that this is not restricted only to that number. And yes, we will expand that for sure. And yes, like you rightly said, there has to be a beautiful blend of the assessment and the learning that happens.
I'm sorry, first I must answer a question that is coming here.
Sure, sir.
There's a question that has been in the chat box. Why do you have hatred for English? I'm speaking in English. I love this language. There's no question of hating the language of English. What I am for, and you should also be for, is for your mother tongue. Don't learn English for the sake of learning English. Love your mother tongue. That's what I'm saying. Loving your mother tongue doesn't mean you hate somebody else. Loving your mother doesn't mean you hate others. So please, I stand corrected. If you have misunderstood me, I am absolutely all for English. What I'm saying here is, it is easier, and its researchers have established that you can understand complex concepts much better in mother tongue than in other language. And mind you, I'm not opposed to English. English was not my mother tongue, but I think I can speak it reasonably well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that clarification. And I think there's somebody who's actually saying that, yes, sir, we all learned it in the same way. And I think the history is just repeating, where we are going back to our roots. We've all learned it the same way, yes. And there's a question, sir, how vocational education will be assessment? How will vocational education be assessment?
Now, vocational education is more of action than knowledge. Yes, there is knowledge, but more of action. So assessment of that would be in terms of what you do. That's how assessment will happen. And it can also be done electronically, by the way, because you can be given actually tools on the net, and you can be asked to perform a particular task on the net. So it can be done slightly more complex than the questions that you have. It can be done electronically. In fact, all the imaging, etc., is done electronically these days. But you have to understand how to work with your hands before you go into a virtual world.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for that answer. And there's another question asking, how far is the policy going to help English medium private schools going forward?
I don't think the policy is against anybody. By all means, an English medium school shall continue. It does not say that English medium school should not. And the policy also does not mandate that every school should teach in mother tongue. You know, the beauty of the policy is that there are no mandates in it. Actually, policy does not mandate anything. Policy is a guideline, a guidance to people. Those who want to do will do it. The mandate will come from government orders. And I don't think any government is going to say that stop English medium schools. That's not going to happen. But the policy sets to rest certain misapprehensions in the minds of some of us who believe that you can only grow if you learn English. That's a misapprehension.
Okay. I totally agree with that, I think. It's absolutely right, sir, what you just said. Because there's a misapprehension that it's only English that helps the growth, which is not true at all. So there's another question from Miss Nidhi Bhel. She has asked, sir, does this periodic assessment that is suggested right now remove the examinations from schools? Because
if I had my way, I will remove the examination system and do it the assessment way. But that's not, I'm not running the show. There are many people who earn their living through examination system. It's probably a bit premature to talk in terms of doing with examination. The developed countries have actually done away with. They have this continuous evaluation. But we are not in that process of development as of now to eliminate examinations. So examinations will be there. But we can always reduce the importance of examination by doing this evaluation.
Okay. There's a question from Ms. Indra. Will it be difficult for children to change the medium of learning at 6th standard?
I don't think it will happen that way. I have seen it in Sardar Patel Vidyalaya, where children switch over. At that age, the child learns very fast. I mean, I have my personal, I can't do that anymore. I can't remember names now. At that point in time, I remember I used to read a poem of 8 pages twice, and I used to read it out. I mean, understanding, learning, It's like a blank slate. So anything that gets written gets embedded. So it's not that difficult as it is made out to be. Psychologically, we'll have to first get equipped. That it's not very difficult to switch from one language to the other. World over, people keep switching from one language to the other. And at that age, it's much easier to do that than at my age, maybe.
Okay, thank you for that answer, sir. I think it's totally proves the point. And there's another question that has come in, which says that children, even after second PUC, are unable to decide about their careers. And so many people decide to switch their degree subjects. So how can students choose in grade 9? Is there any policy like that to choose subjects? Because I read something like that.
I'm glad this question was asked. Children are unable to decide even now. It's not that anything will change then. What the policy does is to give them more options. If some of the children want to exercise that option, they'll exercise it. It is not mandated that you will do this. Right now also, children they have to decide between science side, art side, or commerce or whatever. Then they will have a greater option. They can still choose science. They can still choose commerce. But there will be many children. It will be wrong to say that every children is unable to decide. There will be many other children who would want a combination. They have a choice. So giving a choice doesn't mean that everyone is forced to choose. Choice you can exercise not to choose. You can continue to study in science arts. So it's not that difficult as it is made out to be. It allows a large number of children who, as of now, want to have a combination, want to study history along with physics. They are not allowed now. Then they will be allowed to do that. They may still not choose to do that.
Okay. Right. Nice, sir. And there's another question that has come in asking, hereafter, will there be only one board throughout in India, or is it going to be the same system that's going on?
Who said that? Who said there will be one board?
They're asking, will there be only one board?
I don't think. The policy doesn't talk about a single board. There's no need to have a... See, the reason, India is a very diverse country. At best, India can have a broad curriculum framework, which NCERT will design. Thereafter, the states will have to take a call individually within that broad national work. I have never been an advocate of single board. During my time also, this was raised. Why don't you have a single board? I said education is much more complex than a law, which is uniform through the country. But education is concerned, Kerala would want to teach something. For example, it would be worthwhile, and policy also recognizes that local history needs to be taught. Now, you can't define local history sitting in Delhi. Another example which I gave Dr. Kasturi Rangan when he met me, the chairman, when he came here, and it's there in my book also, in Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, where I say, if a teacher doesn't go to school in Kerala, he or she is likely to be beaten up. In UP and Bihar, they take it as a right not to go to the school. 25% of the teachers don't go to the school. How can you have a single policy sitting in Delhi? I have always believed that all wisdom does not reside in Delhi. There's a lot of wisdom around the country. So we should have to take into account that wisdom along with the wisdom in Delhi and then move forward. We can't decide everything sitting in Delhi. Shouldn't be deciding.
Right. So there's another question, sir, that has come from Lisa ma'am. She would like to know, how can vocational education be followed effectively in schools if we are implementing it in schools?
I did not have time, so I didn't talk about the implementation problems of the policy. Whereas I appreciate wholeheartedly what is there in the policy. My problem with the policy with regard to the implementation of it, and vocational education being one of them. Now, every school may not have the facility for that. Vocational training required additional physical facilities. All schools may not have it. But that's not, let's not say that problem is not, you can't solve them. It can be. Schools can club actually the facilities, and one facility could be used by more than one children. There are many ways that you can look at the problem and you can sort it out, but certainly there is a problem of creating those facilities, those vocational training facilities, which may not be very easy to do to begin with.
All right. All right. So there's another question that comes in asking, B.Ed is compulsory for primary, and so what about preschool, early education teachers? Why is any university not having any course on early years? Why is
no,
that?
They didn't have it because there was no such provision. Now that there is a provision in the policy, the NCERT, the NCT are working day in and day out to work out a curriculum for getting teachers for that. In fact, this is going to be one of the biggest challenges in this policy, to get teachers to teach children before class 1, because it's two different ball game. The policy recognizes it, that it's going to be different set of teachers. But getting them will be a serious problem, because first, to get these teachers to train to teach them, and secondly, to find money to pay them in government schools. These are going to be problems, the operational problems. But in principle, I think that's the right way forward.
Right. Okay. Do we have time, sir? Could I ask you a couple of questions?
I'm here till, as I said, 6 o'clock. You have another 10 minutes.
All right, sir. So there's a question from Ms. Shahzia Begum. She would like to know, how do we divide the students on mother tongue basis in one place like a school that is considered to be a secular place? I mean, won't that be like including divisional based on language skill?
Okay, let me explain this to you. More than 90% of the schools will have children of the same mother tongue. More than 90%. I can say it with all the. Less than 10% will have this problem. Let us try and understand that problem, and then do it. Just hold on for a moment. Just a minute.
Yes, Shrikant, could you please unmute Swarup sir? Shrikant, are you there? Shrikant, Preeti, are you there? Could you please unmute Swarup sir?
Okay, that's a nice way of telling the speaker that you had enough of him and you muted.
Not at all, sir. Not at all.
Thank you.
No, definitely not at all, sir. Definitely not at all. Shrikant, please unmute Denny sir as well. Denny sir,
no, thank you. It was becoming a bit too serious, so I thought.
Not at all, sir. Not at all. Not at all.
Yes,
like,
go ahead.
Teachers are literally pouring questions here, and I'm finding
no problem. So can I suggest something? I will be here, as I said, till 6 o'clock. Sure. You can circulate my email ID to them, swarup8@yahoo.com, okay. SWARUP, digit number 8@yahoo.com, okay. And they can ask me questions subsequently also. That is normally what I do in most of the webinars, because in most of the webinars, I run out of time. So I'm typing it here as well.
Sure, sir.
Okay, this is my email ID. And all of you can note it. You can mail your questions to me. I love responding to even as Secretary Education, I used to guarantee everyone that I would respond within 24 hours. It is much easier for me now. Okay, please go ahead. You have another 8 minutes. You can ask some more questions.
Yes. There is a question which I really liked, because that's a question which most of the government people and bank employees would be having in their mind. What about the children whose parents are in transferable jobs? Will they not face the difficulties of multiple languages when they go?
They would. But you will always have schools within a particular area. And you can have a different medium. As I said, the policy does not mandate a particular medium. Policy is a guideline that shows the way forward. So many schools are going to adopt it. Some will not adopt it, and there's no mandate that you can do that.
So which means even if there are any language problems, like if students have a language problem or something, that can be, taken care of by keeping the policy in mind, is what you're suggesting, sir, if I'm not wrong.
Let us look at how policy rolls out. First of all, I would like to rest all the misapprehensions in your mind that it's going to be implemented as soon as my speech gets over. It won't. It will take, the policy will roll out over the years. That is one. Number two, policy is a guideline given to those to rethink and follow those guidelines. It is not a mandate that you should do it immediately. So don't get worried about it, that if you don't have a mother tongue teacher, your school will be closed tomorrow. It won't happen. I can guarantee. Because we had I had an institution called Nexus of Good, and we had a webinar when the Secretary of School Education herself came and made a speech. And let me set your misapprehension to rest, that it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's a guideline and you can evolve. If you do feel that this is the way forward, you can do it. Many schools wanted to do it, but now that the guidelines have come, they will do it. Other schools may take their time, may not do it at all.
Right.
Can I take the last question, Vidya? Can I ask sir one question?
Yes, please, Ragashri, all yours. Yes.
So I have a question related to teacher training. So what kind of training, how do you think it will be implemented for, upgrading the skills of teachers? Because that is really required given the policy? There are lots of changes that are suggested, and teachers will have to adopt those changes. They will be actually leading that change in the school. So what kind of
one of the most remarkable features of this policy is teachers, and a very important aspect of teachers is teachers training. They talk about teachers training before getting into the service and after getting into the service. I recall we laid this emphasis when I was there between 2016 and 2018. We set up a portal. If you have time, sometime have a look at this portal called Diksha. It is one of the most comprehensive and finest portals that you can think of, that actually enables the teachers to learn on their own. And the beauty of that portal is that it has a navigation tool. So the problem today is not information, it is too much information. How do you navigate? So if you want to learn about refraction and you type refraction on YouTube, you'll get hundreds of videos. You don't know which one to see. You'll take the entire day. So Diksha navigates, allows you to navigate and go to probably the finest video available on that. And it is a portal by the teacher, for the teachers, of the teachers. So they are going, and the policy talks about Diksha. So they are going to strengthen that. And teachers training is going to be very, very important. Earlier, what used to happen was that teachers were trained because there was a target to be fulfilled. Now the teachers will be trained as per their requirement. So you determine what are the gaps in that teacher in terms of upgrading her skills, and then train her appropriately. So the policy lays phenomenal importance on training of teachers.
Thank you so much. Yes. I think they are also, I mean, there are some questions that, also there are certificates required for these certifications required for these trainings. So how will that be fulfilled if it's, the teachers get self-train themselves, then how will they get the certificates? Because that is a mandate.
In the same manner as you are doing in your system here.
Yeah.
So there will be a set of questions. If you qualify what SAT, CAT and MAT do, you answer those questions and you get that certificate. So getting a certificate based on a particular evaluation test will not be very difficult. It is very easy. You self-educate yourself and then give a test. It's not very difficult. That's the easier part of the policy. Okay, now that the time is concluding, I have just a couple of observations to make here. I'm sure you all would have a lot more questions, and I wish I had more time to interact with you. It's a pleasure interacting with you all, and some very well-informed questions that have come. So I have given my email ID, swarup8@yahoo.com, and you can come back to me on this question. I have another request to make. As I said, I have written this book, Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant, which has a few chapters on school education. I'm sure you're going to enjoy reading that. So if you find time, do read that book, and I look forward to your feedback on that. It talks about other dilemmas of a civil servant, but I think the most interesting phase was the last 2 years of my service as school education secretary, where I enjoyed interacting with some of the mafias and some of the finest people that I came across. I learned a lot, probably making others learn much lesser. I enjoyed those 2 years, and I hope you'll enjoy that. And with that, I thank you all for inviting me here. I enjoyed being here. I hope you also benefited with this interaction. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your presence and helping us clear so many thoughts that we had on NEP, and clarifying that this is a policy and it will be as good as it is implemented. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective and coming here for the launch. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. God bless you. I'll take leave of you then.